If you're like most instructors at the University of Toronto, you've probably thought about using PowerPoint in your lectures. However, people often have questions about teaching with PowerPoint. Does PowerPoint improve student learning? What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of using PowerPoint? And what are the best ways to design PowerPoint slides? To see what research has to say about some of these questions, we interviewed Jim Hewitt, an educational technology researcher at OISE. Let's listen to what he has to say.
To begin with, there's no research evidence that PowerPoint lectures are any more effective in terms of student learning than lectures that use an overhead projector. So if you're comfortable using overheads, switching to PowerPoint is unlikely to improve your students' test scores. Now there's some research that students think they are learning more when you use PowerPoint, and students also tend to think that instructors who use PowerPoint are better prepared. However, students don't actually learn any more or any less than other students, according to controlled tests. Well, I think dual coding theory has a lot of implications for PowerPoint presentations. Dual coding theory suggests that visual information and verbal information are processed along separate channels, and that our mind creates both visual and verbal representations of knowledge. So one of the implications of this is that learning can be enhanced if you present a concept in both verbal format and visual format. That way there's both a verbal and a visual encoding of that concept in the mind. Now humans are pretty good at taking in both verbal and visual information at the same time, assuming the two are linked and have something to do with each other. So in a PowerPoint presentation, it's often very effective to display an image on the screen and then to talk about that image. In other words, combine verbal with the visual. However, dual coding theory also suggests that it can be difficult for us to simultaneously process two types of content coming through the same channel. So for example, if you use PowerPoint to display a paragraph of text, and then you proceed to talk about that text, you risk overwhelming your audience because they now have two types of verbal information to attend to, the stuff you're saying and the stuff that's written on your PowerPoint slide. They'll interfere with one another. If they read the paragraph on your PowerPoint slide, then while they're reading, they won't be able to concentrate on what you're saying. On the other hand, if they concentrate on what you're saying, then they won't be able to read the content of your slide. So the problem here is that most people end up jumping back and forth between reading the slide and listening to what you're saying, and don't really do either of those things very well. So if you take dual coding into account, there are a number of simple strategies that you can use when developing PowerPoint slides. According to dual coding theory, we can process visual content and verbal content simultaneously. So it's a good idea to display images and talk about those images. If you're displaying text, reveal one bullet point at a time. Reveal a bullet point, then talk about it, then reveal another one and talk about it, and so forth. Don't show the entire slide all at once, because people will read the entire slide and they won't be listening to what you're saying while they're doing so. Use just 4 or 5 words for each bullet point if you can. That way you minimize the amount of time that people spend reading, and you maximize the amount of time they spend listening. If you have just a few words for each bullet point, then a slight pause after the presentation of each point should give the audience enough time to read what you've written, after which they can focus on what you were saying. If for some reason you need to present a long passage of text on a PowerPoint slide, then stop talking for a second to give the audience adequate time to read the text, and then proceed. If your PowerPoint slide contains complex information, such as a graph, take extra time to explain the contents of that slide. For example, if you're displaying a bar graph, explicitly talk to the audience about the variable on the x-axis, the variable on the y-axis, and what the graph as a whole reveals. Basically what you want to do is design your presentation in such a way that the conditions for learning are optimal. And this means presenting visual and verbal content in combination wherever possible, and minimizing the amount of verbal content on your slides so people can focus on what you're talking about.
If you haven't done so, try using PowerPoint in your own teaching, and try using some of Jim's PowerPoint tips. Want to learn more about teaching with technology? please visit us at Oise Technology Tips website.